Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. I know a lot of things have happened in this past month, but I'm not here to discuss news. I rather want to talk about a little something I observed in these last couple of weeks. But before I get into that, I want to invite you to subscribe, to like this video, to comment below, and to interact with me. Let's get this started. Over the last couple of weeks, in fact, over the last couple of months, years even, we have seen the blatant double standards the liberals hold for themselves and for conservatives. In the United States, it was obvious very recently, but this happens all over the Western world, I would say. Rules for thee, but not for me, has become a phrase representative of today's culture that many so-called liberals fail to recognize. They encouraged the destruction of cities for months and the terrorizing of the country. They justified attacks on federal buildings and historical monuments and said it was righteous. They have insurance when small business owners lost everything because of the Black Lives Matter destruction. But somehow, some conservatives rushing the Capitol and breaking some windows is a horrifying attack on democracy and a horrifying act of terrorism. Bruh. I'm not going to go into detail about what happened at the Capitol or about the identified BLM and Antifa people which were there agitating the crowds, and they were found to be part of the chaos that day. I know liberals are going to deflect and talk about Trump. They're gonna hear me and say, but Trump. This is not about Trump, let me tell you. I wanted to address the hypocrisy, the double standards, and the inconsistency from progressives. Some liberals are very aware of the double standard. They get a power trip out of it. Then we have the everyday normie liberal who seems to sincerely not see it. That normie liberal still believes they're holding higher moral ground. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about apolitical normies that lean Democrat just because of default programming. I'm talking about those who regularly engage in some kind of social media activism, posting black squares on their Instagram, and who will hate Donald Trump because they believe he's somehow the source of all systemic issues.
A white supremacist president who incited a white supremacist insurrection. We have a mandate to legislate in defense of Black lives. The first step in that process is to root out white supremacy, starting with impeaching the white supremacist in chief.
But how do these people who argue with us, friends, relatives, lose acquaintances? How do they square the overwhelming evidence that their side is destructive, degenerate, immoral, and demonic, but still think they're on the right side of history? This is quite simply cognitive dissonance. According to psychologists, the dissonance experienced in the mind when holding mutually exclusive beliefs causes a unique form of mental trauma. Are we surprised at all that liberals overwhelmingly suffer from mental illnesses and mental health issues? Facts and opinions which challenge one's self-identity of long-held beliefs, worldviews, can result in agony for a person, which can produce a constant feeling of desperation. A basic theme in cognitive dissonance is that the brain cannot stand ideational conflict. The brain works so hard towards resolving it that it will employ faulty reasoning in order to resolve it. When presented to contradictory facts and positions, they will effectively blind themselves to them. So there's a psychologist by the name of Anthony Greenwald who wrote in his book Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good that the mind's biases are firmly enslaved in the ego and its greatest central design, such as one's self-image as a humanitarian or morally superior person. This explained the liberals' hyper-defensive reaction towards evidence regarding problems like multiculturalism, as an example. Like junkies, their minds will respond when long-held beliefs are challenged, such as avoiding the conflicting evidence and its source. When confronted with opposed facts, the person can resort to convoluted or fantastical relativistic arguments, the typical liberal mental gymnastics. Margaret Hefferman, a cognitive dissonance expert, says that humans are prepared to pay a very high price to preserve their most cherished ideas and beliefs, sort of like the destruction of their culture and society, just so they can preserve their identity as a morally superior humanitarian. You can actually modify human behavior the same way you can modify animal behavior by rewarding them with some things and punishing them with others. In humans' case, this would be rewarding them when voicing the right opinions and chastising them when they voice the wrong opinions.
Nancy Pelosi told us she didn't care about old statues. Mitch McConnell said he didn't care about the names of military bases. So suddenly this old building is important now. You can't have that. There's been a complete collapse of equality before the law now. Ever since the COVID began, basically. There are some groups that have enjoyed the license to go out and loot and burn every night in American cities. And the more they are not subject to any laws, the more onerous the burden that falls upon the law-abiding, so that they can't go out and open their hair salon. They can't have granny round for Christmas dinner. So we've got a completely bifurcated system where the less law that applies to one group, the more micro-regulated the lives of the other group are. And at some point that has to give. And whoever is behind this, to a certain degree, that gave today in Washington.
That technique over a long period of time can be used for humans to internalize certain beliefs or develop a predisposed lens in which to see the world. Over time, the person is no longer aware of these filters, such as, well, this is politically correct to think about, and simply believes that his view of things is independent and self-determined. And although the blocking out of information can apply to conservatives as well, specifically traditional conservatives, it's important to see why this is largely a liberal thing. Such people operate in a constant state of uncertainty and neurotic discomfort. Traditional conservatives, on the other hand, do not constantly face evidence that their worldview is problematic. They do not face evidence that a traditional wholesome family is a problem, as an example. Whereas liberals can see the rising fashion of feminism is making more women depressed and more men depressed as a result, and confused about their identity and their purpose in the world. More women in their late 30s are depressed because they chased career and status and find that they cannot find the purpose and fulfillment in those things anymore. And trust me, for someone who considered herself a feminist in her early 20s and late teens, I can say that this was a hard pill to swallow for me as well. What about multiculturalism and diversities as ideals in the liberal worldview? Progressives in Europe are constantly being faced by the evidence, even though the media tries to hide it as much as they can. They're facing the evidence that the opening of their borders and the multiculturalization of their societies has led to more harm than good and rising crime rates, among other things. Conservatives, and Christians especially, don't face constant evidence that having a conservative family is a danger for a child. Conservatives have very real worries, such as concern for your job and your family's future, or a continuation of a culture of the country which your ancestors fought for in the face of massive foreign immigration. Conservatives are generally not socially engineered. They do not have cultural and media backing. On the other hand, the liberal worldview is constantly propagated through every major establishment of the West. Once you see the propaganda on TV and movies, you can't unsee it. The mainstream media operates daily to provide reinforcement, assurance, and social pressures that liberals, especially white liberals, need to stay on point. They need support to maintain their beliefs and get through their cognitive dissonance. This does not apply to nationalists and traditional conservatives in the West, for they do not control or direct Western institutions. This liberal paradigm rests on this shaky foundation. It requires continuous upkeep and institutional endorsement. By contrast, the realist worldview of Western traditionalists and conservatives is given no cultural assistance and having no social benefits. Because as soon as you voice out your opinion, you're probably going to get trolls coming after you or friends chastising you. They have, however, the satisfaction of living in accordance with reality and human nature, using Occam's razor to observe reality instead of some relativistic explanation or mental gymnastics. We observe human nature. We observe history. We follow instincts and our natural human order. Not to mention, a lot of traditional conservatives hold God to be the bedrock of their life. Again, this helps explain why in general conservatives have better mental well-being than liberals. A little white pill, the liberal paradigm will continue to develop cracks, and its contradictions within Western societies will only increase.
We must work together to confront forces, whether they come from inside or out, from the South or the East, that threaten over time to undermine these values and to erase the bonds of culture, faith, and tradition that make us who we are. If left unchecked, these forces will undermine our courage, sap our spirit, and weaken our will to defend ourselves and our societies. We are the fastest and the greatest community. There is nothing like our community of nations. The world has never known anything like our community of nations. We write symphonies. We pursue innovation. We celebrate our ancient heroes, embrace our timeless traditions and customs, and always seek to explore and discover brand new frontiers. We reward brilliance. We strive for excellence and cherish inspiring works of art that honor God. We treasure the rule of law and protect the right to free speech and free expression.
Alright guys, that's it for today. If you're watching this on Instagram, I would appreciate some interaction since I'm being shadow banned. If not, if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and make a comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.